All right. How's that?
Good? Yeah,
Yeah.
sounds good. All right. Well, welcome part
Sorry about
two
that.
to this conversation. There is no such thing as death. The reason why I wanted to continue, and thank you for allowing us to do this,
Sure.
is because there is, these scenarios, they're not as hypothetical. I mean, even though they technically are right now, they're not really as hypothetical because it's something that we've been dealing with, in my instance, quite a bit in the last year and a half, right? And
Mhm.
so, and all sorts of different kinds of death and loss, right? From,
Sure.
you know, um, death of loved ones due to COVID, death of loved ones due to other illnesses, death due because of accidents, and death also because of violence,
Hmm.
enacted by another person or people.
Hmm.
So quite a bit of different things, and some, I guess, death by natural causes. I don't really know what that means. I guess it's death because it's time, right?
Hmm.
Um, and that scenario where you get the phone call, let's
Hmm.
say from a friend,
Hmm.
right? Hey, my father passed away from COVID, right? That you get that call.
Hmm.
If having this perspective on death,
Hmm.
not feeling comfortable, not feeling aligned with being like, I'm so sorry for you.
Hmm.
What do we say instead? Or what are some things that we can say that are so compassionate,
Well, so
aligned
that's,
with
I'm glad you
aligned with
just,
spiritual workout practice,
well, I
you
think
know?
compassion is really what guides it there. So, what is compassion? Largely, compassion is listening, right? So, what I know for certain that happens, I know it from being on the receiving end of it, and I know it from observing it for a few decades and listening to a lot of other people share the experience. What happens is the one who has experienced the loss is suddenly the repository for everybody's own unprocessed stuff about grief and loss, right? So a lot of what people tend to do is come at the person who's just had the loss with their own shit and their own fears and their own, or they're assuming that the person is processing this experience the way they would or the
Right.
way they have. And that is the last thing we want to do because it's all judgment and the person is sitting there. I mean, I had this experience time and again. People are coming at me with, I'm so sorry. I'm like, if you would get off of I'm so sorry, I could tell you about some
When you
amazing
or your
things
partner
that
died.
are going on with my dead partner, but you have
Right.
no, you're not even available to hear it. So now I have to sit here and listen to your blah, 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 blah that hasn't, it doesn't resonate with me at all. So that's on that, in that example, I feel like just a lot of judgment coming at me. So if I'm the other person and now I'm addressing the person who is experiencing the loss, I just want to know what it's like for them. Tell me what it's like. What's going on? Do you want to talk about it now? Is this just an information call? Do you need me? Would you like me to do anything? Just ask it. It's not that complicated. It's just listening. What's going on? And usually they'll say, I don't know, or I have no idea what to do, or I
So the
also like to
first thing
give,
that you would say when someone's like, hey, you
tell
know
me
what?
what happened. I'd say, tell me what happened. Because people really need to
Okay.
talk about what happened. It's very fresh in their minds. They're still processing it. So just giving that invitation and giving them the space to, well, I couldn't believe it. The nurse said this and we thought everything was fine and we went out for dinner and then we came back. Like whatever, everybody's got a story all the time. So, and everyone needs to tell those stories and to process that through. And they don't always get a lot of room or space to do that. So if I'm receiving that call, what happened? Tell me what happened. And then again, it's relationship dependent. Is this a close friend who lives right down the street and needs me in their house? Or am I on the other side of the country and I'm just being informed? And could you make a few phone calls for me? Or, no, I just wanted you to know, I know my Uncle Harry loved you so much, and I just wanted you to know. Whatever, well, tell me what happened. What happened? What can I, and then it's just listening more and listening more. And most of the time, people are going to tell you they don't know what they need or what they want. So I also like to impart some piece of encouragement to just listen to themselves and not listen to outside forces, and just, there's no one way to go through this. And it's and if we get further into it, then it's the work I do, the spiritual workout. This is an opportunity for growth in your life, like anything that happens, at some point. They're not ready for that when it just happened, but
Right.
that's 1, 2, 3 months out. It tends to be where around that 3-month mark, where everybody else is sort of over it and gone back to their lives, and it's not as acute for them, and they're not the one with the empty bed, and they're not the one, and that's where I like to offer services to people in terms of, this is in terms of having a different kind of a loss experience if you want to. And then, it's never too late to do that. We were talking earlier about unprocessed grief, palpable in our society. And, if you don't intend to do it, it's probably not going to happen. And by it, I mean moving through it, healing from it, growing from it, and not having it be this, everybody will tell you, it's like wearing a cast on your leg for the rest of your life. It's like part of you is this, or part, and everybody just signs up for that willy-nilly. And I just I couldn't do that.
That so that particular scenario was more of a scenario that involved more like sudden, unexpected kind of deaths. What if you're dealing with someone who gives you a phone call to announce that somebody who's been ill for quite a bit, and they've been kind of keeping you up on, what is that tacking noise? Is that you? Oh, okay. I don't know. What if you have been apprised of, longstanding illness kind of thing, and then you receive a call from a close person, friend, or let's say a close friend, that, like in your case, their partner died, the husband died of cancer, and you were very much apprised of what, the whole experience, the journey. What do you say to that person when you get that call?
It's really the same. It really is. What's it like? What's going on? What happened? Do you want to talk about? What are if it's the immediate, the first call is usually about business. I don't hear you. I hear static. That's so weird. Do you hear that beeping?
Okay. Oh, there we go. We're good.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
So that scenario, yeah. Look, if it's the first call and it's business and it's just logistics and who's doing what, where, what, that's a little bit different. But even then, it's really just letting people talk, giving them the space. What's going on? What happened? How did it happen? What are you doing? Especially if it's somebody who's been sick for a long time, that person all of a sudden has way more time on their hands if they've been caregiving, right? And all of a sudden that job is gone along with their loved one. So there's so much energy shifting and processing going on. I'm just always like, just talk to me, talk. I like to give people, but that's no different than everyday life also.
Yeah.
But I'm so it really is just about I can't anymore say I'm sorry. I don't. Um,
Well, it doesn't feel authentic, anymore. I mean, for me, I'll say it because that's like what you were saying earlier. There was just no language. There was a missing piece here that I couldn't
yeah,
really go to. Like I knew what's already here in terms of processing or not processing this.
yeah, yeah,
I knew that I wasn't aligned with that. And yet I didn't really know what I was aligned with, I didn't have the language or anything. And so that's why I'm asking you, because this is what we do here in Spiritual Workout. It's like we apply these concepts, these ideas, these concepts to the nitty gritty of everyday life. So this is why I'm bringing up these specific scenarios,
hmm
because this is like what I encounter. I'm just kind of like I don't want to say
right,
something that I just say without any meaning to it. And yet I
right,
also want to, be compassionate and not be, I know this is judgmental, but just not be an asshole. You know what I'm saying about this experience?
yeah,
Not be an
yeah.
asshole, not being like, well, because my concepts, conceptually, I don't believe in this, so I'm going. You know what
Well,
I'm saying? It's like,
I
but
do because, and this is a huge part of why I'm having this conversation. I want to de-weird
yes,
the woo-woo piece of this. That seems to be one of my roles, some sort of a bridge between the woo-woo and the very earth-grounded, everyday, regular
yes,
people. But we're
yes.
also everyday, regular people, some of us anyway, who are living in this more conscious way and have a different belief system. And so it's about, letting, not judging the other one, but just encouraging this one. And I just think that this subject, the topic of, like we said, loss through death or loss of any kind, and grief and all that goes with it, is an area, a subject, a topic that is rife for this a little bit more merging of the metaphysical with the physical.
Yeah, because that's something that like for instance, we're talking about loss through death, right? Physical death.
Mm-hmm.
But I know that I don't really run into this when people talk to me about loss of a job or a relationship, because like for example, with divorce, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, I never, because I know, firsthand that divorce is a very different experience for a lot of people. It doesn't necessarily have to be a grief stricken experience. And it's funny because
Mm-hmm.
I had this conversation with a friend of mine, a very dear friend of mine, where she was like, my friend's getting divorced and, like it's like it was like messing her up and stuff. And I was just like, well, maybe divorce is not this tormented experience for your friend, I mean, I know
Mm-hmm.
in my case, my parents' divorce, for instance, I felt was like an amazing thing, you
Yeah.
know? Like I felt it was an amazing thing. I felt like, this doesn't I
Makes
felt like there
things
was a lot of
better.
judgment, involved when people are like, oh, it has to be bad. It's always this like terrible experience and da 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 da, you know. Uh, and I find myself being a little bit more at ease in
Mm-hmm.
responding to people that
It's,
bring that up.
it's the exact
However,
same thing.
I still run into like
Sure.
weirdness
And so
when,
that right there, to me, that just goes in the bucket of we're living in the swirl of an old
yeah,
consciousness dying and a new one coming, and it's
and I'm
all in front of
practicing,
us,
I'm
and
learning,
we're all finding our way. Yeah. I'm not where I was 5 years ago or 10 years ago, and I'm not where I'll be 5 years from now, probably. And, that's what we're all doing.
Yeah, yeah. So that's why I wanted to bring these particular scenarios up because one for myself, just I'm coming across this more and more, these phone calls and Well, that's
Hmm.
probably another bit of conversation because there is this whole thing of like, yes, there is no such thing as death. And at the same time, I don't intend for it. I'm not intending for that, right?
Hmm.
Meaning, I want to live,
Hmm.
you know, I want
Hmm.
to live. So that's another thing too that I'm like, and we had a little bit of this conversation too, where it's just like, well, are we getting into resistance or are we just intending for what we want, right? So like, let's say we have a diagnosis,
Hmm.
of it could possibly be fatal,
Hmm.
right? Um, a lot of people's intentions will revolve around being healthy and alive
Hmm.
and living really well in a healthy manner with vitality. I want to be alive and until so I could witness all these different things throughout life and family and loved ones and all that. And yet, you know, death can still be something that is a factor in this.
I'm not sure if this is going to relate to what you just said.
Okay,
I think it might, and if it doesn't, just shut
I'll
me
let
up.
you know.
But no, I just lost it.
Oh, okay. Well,
It'll,
I just was,
it'll come back.
I noticed that, you know, I can't intend for others. We know this
Hmm.
in spiritual workout. I don't want for my loved ones to die, let's say if they get a diagnosis or anything like that. I don't want for
So,
them to die in a car crash, right? Like I don't want these things to happen. I'm not focusing on them, and
right.
yet I feel like sometimes the way, or maybe this is just me, but like the way we're talking about death and like this
All
perspective
right. So
on
let's
death.
take, okay.
Yes.
So that comes down to belief again. So somewhere along the line, I believed what everybody believed. You're supposed to live a good long life. And if you live less than that, it's a tragedy of some sort. Uh, if a child dies before their parent, there's nothing worse. Um, there's an order to things, and even that, right? So I don't believe any of that anymore.
I don't either.
And I do firmly believe, and it's just me, that's not just me, but I'm not trying to get anybody else to believe it. I don't believe anymore that anyone dies the wrong way at the wrong time,
No.
no matter how they die.
Right.
So I don't go into tragedy. I don't go into any extra layers of what it all means. That's what grief is, and we haven't really gotten into that specifically. But grief are just the thoughts we think that make us feel so shitty. He's gone forever. They'll never be alive. It's a
Mm-hmm.
tragedy. This shouldn't have happened. Something
Mm-hmm.
went wrong. All those kinds of things. I no longer even entertain for 2 seconds. Um, so
Are
it
we
really does.
entertaining that? Are we entertaining that if we don't want, like, if we want to live long lives with our loved ones? Like, are we entertaining that? Because that's what I'm reflecting on, because I don't feel conceptually, I don't believe in, um, children shouldn't die before their parents. Like I don't believe, or this was a tragedy. He died way too soon, before his time or her
Right.
time. I don't believe that.
Hmm.
However, I still feel grief, right? Like sad
So,
because
because you're
because
believing what?
because because it is a change of I'm
Yes,
not going to be able to engage them in physical form. I'm not going to be able to
right.
hug them, smell them, at least,
For sure. For sure.
that is the stuff that I'm like, right? Like my cousin, a very close cousin of mine passed away recently pretty shockingly. No one
Yeah.
expected, no one saw it coming. And, you know, I have all these beliefs about death, you know, this perspective, this spiritual perspective about death. And yet at the same time, I was also like, but I still want to engage with my cousin in physical form. You know what I'm saying? Like I still want to hug her. And then of course there were other things beyond that
So
informed my experience.
this is the juicy part. So this is where we really do discern between what is no longer here that used to be here, because that's real. It is real that you're not going to touch her anymore.
Yes.
Hug, sit down for dinner. Well, maybe you could in a different way,
Right.
but you know, right?
Physical
So
touching.
then
Yeah.
for those of us who are processing through that, that is real. That is that loss. I mean, I know for sure
I'm not
it
going to
can,
deny that, right?
no,
Right.
and you can actually feel the loss. Like you know, people say they feel empty. I know what that feels like. It's like, wow, there's something that was here, and it's just that energy is not right. And so, for sure, there are things for us to process. But we're we're met with the question of loss in the first place. And you just used a word that I prefer to use, which is something has changed. So one of the things that I've come to personally through this journey is we're not getting something right about loss. Why are all these people having all these horrible experiences? Like, we must be missing something. It can't be that this is how life is supposed to be, that people are supposed to suffer in loss for decades. You
Right.
know, I just didn't believe that, you know, I thought something was off about that.
My favorite is
So,
it's never going to be the same. Well,
well,
it is never going to be the same because
correct.
it is
But
change.
look around all
But
day
there's
long.
another meaning to added on to that phrase, you know, that statement. For a lot of
Well,
people, that keeps them in suffering, I think.
exactly. And none of these beliefs are devoid of having other ones similar to them. But
Yes.
it really does come down to belief. So for me, it was like, well, what is loss? What are we missing as a society, as humans, about this loss experience? Because we're clearly, in my opinion, we're missing something, because I don't think we're just meant to suffer endlessly. So um, so I have lost something. Well, what does that mean? Did I really lose it? Was it ever mine? Was it ever mine? What does that mean? I had something. I had a house. I had a relationship. I had a job. What does that mean? I had it. It was mine. So for me, I started to shift my belief from having things to experiencing things. I'm here, I'm a spiritual being having a human experience, you know, focus on the experience part. Wow, now I've experienced love. I've experienced love going away. I've experienced death. I've experienced, right? And so, and now everything's changing. Things are changing. Well, I look in nature, and that's the nature of nature is change, and it's our nature to change. So we get
Yep.
in trouble when we
We
believe that
belong
we've
to the
lost
planet. The
things.
planet belongs to us. One of the
Correct.
15 spiritual workout concepts, people.
Yes. And so that's, yeah. So now my big TED talk on this would be about loss is not loss. Loss is change. Grief is a particular kind of experience based on entertaining particular beliefs. Maybe the beliefs are true, maybe they're not. So that's how, for me, it all just breaks down. Or that's how some of that breaks down.
The last thing I want to touch on here, it's not something that you really I don't think you talked about it. You didn't talk about it in the piece, but it has come up in spiritual workout land, as well as just, you know, new consciousness, spirituality spaces about the idea of choosing and soul agenda, something that Neil Donald Walsh, I think, really goes into a lot. I took his Connecting to the Soul course like 5-6 years ago or something, and it introduced me to the whole idea of the soul having its own agenda, right? So while our minds, this is how I kind of navigate my whole thing with this change, this particular kind of change.
Mm-hmm.
And while my mind may not want it, my soul has a different agenda, right?
Mm-hmm.
So in some way, you know how like some people say like, well, they didn't choose to be born, they didn't choose to
I
die.
used to say that all the time.
Yeah. But now with this, spiritual beings having a human experience, it's human experience, choices abound, the soul chooses, right?
I believe that.
I believe that too.
That to me is what it means to talk about coming here as spiritual beings on purpose for a
Yes,
purpose.
you're right. And so I think something that informed my new perspective, or my perspective being a little more aligned with the spiritual workout perspective on death, had been this whole idea of like the soul having its own agenda and that we're choosing to be born and die,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's why these like beliefs of, they died way too soon before their time, you
That's why
know?
it's hard to be at funerals and memorial services
Yes.
sometimes, just because the entire event is based on a belief system that I just don't ascribe to.
But that I think is, I bring this up because I think this is something that sort of undergirds our perspective on death, and how we, yeah, I just feel like that's like a very, that at least for me was something that helped me dispel these ideas about death, these older ideas about death, or I find somewhat limiting for me
Mm-hmm.
ideas about death, was that whole idea of the soul chooses.
Yeah.
Because I
Now,
know my mind is like, I don't like that change.
but that's why in spiritual workout, we're always emphasizing listening to inspiration because that's the whole point. It's like we're either flailing around, figuring it out all in our heads and doing it, or we're living from our hearts, where that's another way of saying from the soul, or I think is what you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's not, they're not necessarily, I mean, when we talk about being in alignment, then we're all aligned. Mind, body, soul, all of it, right? When we feel out of alignment, we're frustrated, things aren't going well, and
Right, because
then
the
something,
mind is like
right,
not in agreement with the soul.
correct. And
Right?
so what we've decided is life is a whole lot better and juicier and more fun and interesting when it's in alignment with the soul. So
Yeah.
let's just do that. Let's not let the things that we experience in life derail us from that. If anything, let's use the bits from our lives to learn to do exactly what we're talking about, and then live entirely new consciousness here in these bodies on this planet.
And to add and maybe ends with this, that whole thing about living more intuitively. You mentioned this in your piece. There is no such thing as death on Medium, Stephen Morrison. You mentioned this in your piece about how you came to live more intuitively, more making decisions, approaching life from the place of the soul, from the intuitive wisdom, right? And I think that a real big piece to feeling, to really living and really thoroughly believing that there is no such thing as death, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is really to be able to establish that connection,
For sure. And it's
like
it's
really
what
establish it. Because I see it with you, I've seen it with other folks who have a real strong connection and aspire. Like they're very committed to that connection with the guides, the spiritual, beyond the mind, right? The great
mm-hmm.
mystery, the soul, collective consciousness, right? Everything you want to call it, what we're talking about, okay? That connection is what really I find like gives people the space, the power to really live that way, live and believe wholeheartedly in this idea or in this perspective on death, right? And that's when something, and the reason I say this is because I notice like conceptually, I have it all down. You know what I'm saying? Like I have it all down. Like not that I scoff, but like when I hear these beliefs, I'm like beliefs, you know, when I'm hearing people like, oh, wait, gone way too soon, you know, but it's like I just hear beliefs. I'm not being like, why you believe that? I don't do that
Right.
now anymore. I don't do that. I've never really done that, you know, because you let people have their experience, right? And yet I found that I think the missing piece for me to really just fully be in that place is strengthening my connection, you know, strengthening my connection with that intuitive wisdom, with that collective consciousness, with that unity consciousness, with God, you know, the spiritual spirit guides, you know, all that. Because it seems to me like every single person that I talk to that feels a bit more at peace on this subject has that connection,
Mm.
you know?
For sure, because
I mean, being able to talk to Duder or communicate, right, in some way with Duder or with your grandmother who you never met, you personally don't remember meeting, right? You were 2 years old when she passed away. Um, Dr. Brian Rice in Many Lives, Many Masters, when his wife's mother passed away, she was dealing with cancer, and like how he was able to help her through that process,
mm-hmm,
right? And also
that's a whole
feel,
other side of
and
it.
it helped him in terms of processing the death of his infant son,
Infant, yeah.
you know, like a month after his son was born, died of a very rare, like 1 in 10 million type of thing, you know? Um, he even said it himself that this experience, you know, of knowing of that there's something that exists beyond the physical
Mm-hmm.
form, you know, that there's something that still lives on, um, is what gave him solace and like help empowered him about his own personal experience as well as his work. You know, it's so
Well,
much so that it helped him lead or guide his mother-in-law as she was
absolutely.
passing. So I feel like that is, you know, something that we can end on here in terms of that connection. You know, I have a feeling personally, I don't know if this is for everyone, is this prescription for everyone. I always stay away from that. But just personally feeling like just strengthening that connection. You know, I've always said this. I want that two-way communication, Stephen.
Me
I
too.
want that two-way
I
communication.
got it. I went from needing a medium psychic intermediary to not
Yes.
really needing that anymore at all.
And it's because of strengthening that connection.
Yes, 100%. And you know, you see it in spiritual workout all the time. How often are we talking about fear?
Yes.
Somebody's got some fear about this, that, or the other thing. Look around. Our whole society is just being hobbled by it. And I'm pretty sure it was Deepak Chopra. Somebody quoted him to me, and maybe it was somebody else. It doesn't matter. But I came to believe it too, that every fear ultimately is rooted in a fear of death.
Dr. Brian Rice said that too. Yeah.
Okay, so what if this happens? What if this? Well, then I'll die, right?
And
So
you've always said
when
this to
you,
me before.
yeah, so when
Always.
you don't have the fear of death, you don't have fear. And you've said to me before, like that I'm fearless and I don't have fear or being surprised. What is there to fear? If I already know that I'm here to have the experiences I'm having and I'm having them, if I know that I'm going to come and go on a schedule that is far beyond my 5D consciousness, that's already pretty much, I'm not saying it can't change, but whatever, that's its own program, then it sure frees up a lot of time and space and energy for us to focus on other things. And that's why this pervasive, unprocessed grief in our inhumanity is, I think, something that we're going to be working through more and more and more, because we cannot take it to the new consciousness. There is no grief in the new consciousness. So anything that we can do here and now to be moving, healing from it, moving through it, using it as a vehicle for growth and creating different experiences, I think is going to be helpful for all of us.
Oh, that made me think of this one other element about death that I'm like, oh my God, am I opening up another can of worms? However, maybe people can relate to this, because we're learning how to walk, people. We're learning how to walk, right? In this new consciousness. So I feel like I'm not necessarily afraid of death itself as
You're
I
afraid of how
am.
you're going to die.
Yeah. Is
Well,
that something that comes up with a lot of people too?
well, but again, it's still a fear, and it's still a fear that's going to run your life, right? So do I fear death? Do I fear how I'm going to die? Nobody is sitting here feeling strong and healthy and saying, yeah, I want to have, an illness that I have for 5 years before I
Right.
die.
Exactly.
Nobody's saying that, but
Or being
nobody's,
tortured or something.
you can't really, if you want to have that experience, there are things you can do, I'm sure, to get yourself into that place, but nobody's doing that, right? And so, I don't know. I mean, it's still a matter of entertaining fear. I'm fearing how I'm going to die. So how do I counter that myself? With an intention. Well, how do you do that? I just say, this body is strong and healthy for as long as I occupy it. I don't know. Am I
I'm sick,
shaping
free.
how I
Yeah.
will die when the time comes? Maybe. Am I having any effect? Maybe. Am I having no effect? Maybe. I don't know. But at least I'm not sitting in fear in that moment where I'm like, there are plenty of people who are strong and healthy, and then boom, they're out of their body, right? So sign me up for that one. But that's just me. So if I think anything, that's all I think. And then I think that thought, boom, done, fine. Now I live my life. I'm not spending any time around fear of how I'm going to die. Because I don't think that's helpful for any of us either. So again, the more that we can do, as you're talking about, maintain that, grow that connection, have more experience with the
Yes.
metaphysical side of life, then I would say we conversely dial down our fear of death, which dials down
Yes.
our fear, period, which is one of the things we're doing right now as we say goodbye to an old dying consciousness.
Great. Well, thank you,
Speaking of death.
Stephen. Yeah.
Thank you. You and I have proven that we can go on and on.
Oh
So,
yeah, yeah. I didn't even think that we're gonna go into this, but this is a weighty topic, and um, uh, it's something that I feel is a topic that has a lot of people reflecting as they learn how to walk in this new
yeah.
consciousness.
Well, and thank you for
Um,
just the forum to have this conversation. And, I'm not the only person
oh no, 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 no,
who writes or talks or teaches about
no,
what we're talking
right.
about. There are people who are way more, uh, you know, but this is my job to bring all of that into regular everyday lives of people and helping us to move through and heal from these situations in ways that truly expand our
Yeah.
awareness,
And I and
increase
I
our capacity to love.
and I appreciate your, sharing with us, like when I asked you these questions about specific scenarios, because that's what I think about. It's just like, okay, well, I want to stay aligned with, in integrity
Yeah.
with what I believe, and perpetuate that, right? Um, and not, saying meaningless things or things that are inauthentic to me, while also not being like I'm a stickler for my concepts. And so I'm just gonna like, well, that's the reality you're creating, or, or
Well, that's one of
hey,
my,
hey,
that's,
my dad just died, unexpectedly. Well, death doesn't really exist. Like, no, this is not what but I want to be able to like, thank you for sharing with us like how we can navigate that, because these are things that we think about, reflect on as we are learning how to walk in this new consciousness,
mhm.
and it's ever evolving. So, you
Yeah.
know,
Well, thank you again. And I do a lot of quote unquote bereavement work, grief and loss
yes.
work. I'm very, very always happy to have those, have that subject in spiritual workout if that's what anybody ever has going on. And again, thank you for, I could talk about this stuff all day
Oh
long. So
yeah,
thank
me
you.
too. So, just for everyone to reiterate, make sure everyone is aware, Stephen Morrison is the creator of Spiritual Workout. He is my co-host of Spiritual Workout Online. That is the place where we hold weekly drop-ins and clinics. Drop-ins and clinics, our drop-in every Monday is basically tackling any kind of issue you may have, any topic or question that you may have, that you'd like to address or work out, as we like to say, using the 15 spiritual workout concepts. You can go right to spiritualworkout.com and take a look at the concepts there and see, hey, I'm in agreement with everything that's being said here. Well, maybe you want to check out our drop in every Monday, which takes place every Monday at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. It goes for 90 minutes. And it's really just a case where anyone can bring up whatever issue they may have. They raise their hand virtually, raise their hand, and they come up and work alongside with Stephen, as Stephen guides them through working this issue out using those 15 spiritual workout concepts. Those are like the basis for the spiritual workout practice. Some of those concepts include, we belong to the planet, not the planet to us, which informs, this spiritual workout perspective on death in terms of change. Everything is energy is another one. Intentions matter. Beliefs matter.
Be
um,
compassionate.
yeah, be compassionate. All sorts of, just so many different kinds of things that these 15 spiritual workout concepts really help us. They help us in so many different ways when we actually apply them to the nitty gritty of everyday life. So that takes place every Monday. And then Tuesdays and Wednesdays are our clinics. Every Tuesday is our E.F.T tapping clinic. That takes place at every Tuesday at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern, goes for 60 minutes. And that's a place where we explore how, when, why to tap. Tapping in quotation marks. It's also what we say for E.F.T, emotional freedom technique. So we're like tapping on the different points. That takes place every Tuesday. So those are the places where that is the place where we tackle physical issues, emotional issues, spiritual issues, changing limiting beliefs. Sometimes we're not exactly knowing what the hell is going on in our inner worlds, outer worlds. And so we'll use tapping for inquiry to figure it out, like, investigate a little bit. And then we also tap to magnify, let's say it's like, I want to magnify this newfound perspective, that I have, let's say on death or something. And I want to magnify like the feeling that I have from that, we use tapping for that. And then Wednesdays is What Do You Want Wednesdays. And that is where we do our intention setting. We hold our intention setting clinic and we answer that beautiful question. What do you want? Who do you want to be? What do you want to have? What do you want to do? Why do we do this? Because the law of attraction is always on. That is another one of our 15 spiritual workout concepts that we closely adhere to, or try to. We're still learning how to walk, people, but that's why we have this intention setting clinic, because we know that that law of attraction is always on. And that starts promptly always at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern. That also goes for 60 minutes. We talked a little bit about intention with this whole thing about not liking the change.
Well, it's part of the process that people would come through and to in spiritual workout with grief and loss would be to set an intention for moving through it. You know, when my partner died,
There you go.
I didn't know anything about anything, but I knew about setting intentions.
That's a very
Well,
popular one in our practice.
yeah, so what do I want out of this? I want to grow from it. I want to heal from it. I want to
Whole and complete.
emerge feeling whole and complete. Right. I didn't know how that was going to happen. I didn't, but I knew that's what I wanted. And that's really what pulled me through. And that's certainly what happened. And so I'm fond these days of saying, you know, time does not heal all wounds. Intention heals wounds. Time makes the wounds more familiar. We get used to them, but that is not healing from them and moving through them and growing from them.
Yeah. We would have, we'll have a separate conversation on what would probably be an extension of this conversation, which is strictly on grief and loss. We definitely talked about that. But just, I think maybe positions as like some of the beliefs that we've entertained in the past about grief and loss and the spiritual workout approach.
Well, it's all part of the same conversation, obviously.
Right,
So,
right.
yeah.
It's just more specifically on that processing part of it, you know? So yeah, that's another one for the books.
Did you just tease your audience?
Exactly. So thank you so much, Stephen.
You're welcome.
Also, for folks that want to know what we're talking about in terms of this post, you can find it on Medium at Stephen Morrison on Medium. You can just go Stephen Morrison.
At Morrison Stephen.
At Morrison Stephen. And so Morrison is, so it's at M-O-R-R. Yeah, Morrison. And then Stephen, Steven. I think that we can probably.
I was just going to try and put it in here.
Yeah, in the comments, right? Can you do that, Stephen?
I think so. Keep talking. It's going to take a moment.
Yeah. So that's where you can find this particular article. There is no such thing as death. You can find it there at the Stephen Morrison account on Medium, the page, which is going to be, once again, at Morrison Stephen on Medium. There you go. There you go. Perfect.
Thank you, Delilah.
Thank you, Stephen. We will we'll talk soon. We'll do another one of these. We'll figure out, timing and all that. But thank you for, doing the 1.5+ hours, almost 2 hours on this subject. Wow.
This happens when I talk to you.
I know. I'm
all right.
a talker.
I'll see you in spiritual workout world.
Absolutely. Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks so much.